I'm now going to attempt to explain Aquinas' conscience. Aquinas was born in 1225 and died in 1274, and described conscience as the mind of man making moral judgments. Now, for Aquinas, the conscience is split into two different distinct areas, and that is the synderesis and the conscienta. The synderesis is the permanent capacity within individuals that urges us to do good and avoid evil. Aquinas noticed this as human nature, that we avoid evil and we attempt and aim for the good. This echoes of Aristotle's virtue ethics, where he was saying that the end of and total purpose of human life was eudaimonia. And it's always important to remember that Aquinas, basically Aristotle is Aquinas' crutch. So yeah. Now, the conscienta is an actual act. It is the judgment and the conclusion that we reach about a moral action. So it is the application of the synderesis, the application of the urge to do good and the knowledge of morality. Now, the synderesis is a bit like the awareness of the primary precepts. It's not... So Aquinas gave us 5 primary precepts. Let's see. Worship God, stay alive, reproduce, learn, and live in an ordered society. They were the 5 primary precepts, and the synderesis is a bit like that knowledge. Now, it's not as though you unlock something and there's the piece of paper with the 5 primary precepts on. It is more like More's intuitionism, this kind of general knowledge of the good. And so the synderesis, in order to access this general knowledge of the good, the synderesis entails the repeated use of right reason. So in constantly using right reason, we acquire knowledge, we become wise, and we learn about the ethical decisions and ethical knowledge of morality. The synderesis actually then allows us to use the conscienta. Now, the conscienta is described by Aquinas as the application of knowledge to activity. So once you've unlocked the synderesis and you have this knowledge of the good, you can then apply that in your daily life. So so I know that in general, general killing is wrong, okay? Generally just, going around murdering people for fun, it's not really the way to go. So because of that, when, let's say my friend annoys me, I'm not going to stab them, because I'm applying the knowledge that general arbitrary killing is wrong to my action by not killing them. So that's kind of how the conscienta works. Now, good character must be developed by habits of virtue. This is very much like Aristotle's virtue ethics, and the idea that we must be good people rather than do good things. So we develop a virtuous character by continually using right reason, applying the conscienta, and creating this further and deeper awareness of the synderesis. Now, Aquinas basically said that a virtuous character enables us to externally judge the moral value of an action, and that we should use emotion and reason and all the possible knowledge that we can to actually try and work out what the right thing in certain situations is to do. So what about how we access the synderesis? So we know that there's this, let's imagine it like a vault. There's a vault which is full of what you need to know. The vault was put in your mind by God, and you just need to unlock it to enable yourself to understand what the good and the right is. How do you unlock that vault? Well, Aquinas suggests it's using the virtue of prudence. Now, prudence is acquired through making mistakes and learning from your mistakes and continuing to use reason in a right way. So the 2 types of mistakes or errors you can make are vincible and invincible. Now, vincible errors are errors which are made knowingly by the individual. So if you do something like give money to a homeless individual, this could be seen as a vincible error if you had failed to realise or find out that actually this particular homeless individual was a severe drug addict, and any money that you gave them would go straight onto drugs. That's the invincible error, because the knowledge is there. People know that this individual is a drug addict, and they know that he will only spend that money on buying drugs and not on trying to kind of help his situation. And so actually it would be better if you maybe gave it to a homeless charity, which would have helped him rather than allowed him to buy the drugs. So that's the invincible error. It's an error that you can be punished for because your own ignorance or your own lack of reason has enabled you to commit such an immoral act. Now, invincible errors are ones which are made unknowingly, and this is very important. Like, Aquinas really stresses the fact that we have to go to every possible length to work out what the right thing to do is. So he says that you should read books, you should use your emotion, you should use your reason, you should try and find out other opinions on the matter, you should go to your priest, you should go crazy before you go and make a decision. You should explore every possible avenue to ensure that there is no knowledge knowledge bank out there which can tell you that what you're doing is kind of wrong. It should all lead to the fact that what you're going to do is the right thing. And so in making invincible errors, hopefully you will realise that you've made an error, and you will then learn from that. And in learning from your errors, you will develop the virtue of prudence. Now, when you have a good use of right reason and you've developed the virtue of prudence, you will be able to really easily access a synderesis, really easily access this knowledge of the good, and this will allow you to apply your synderesis knowledge of the good in everyday situations, which is the conscienta. You're using conscienta. And I always think of it like, so the synderesis is almost like the primary precepts, the core essence of good is what Aquinas is saying, and then the conscienta is a secondary precepts. So you know that you have to learn. One of Aquinas' primary precepts is learning and gaining knowledge, and so you could say a secondary precept is that let's say you're building a community from nothing. So you're building a community from nothing. You would say, right, okay, because of this secondary precept, primary precept of learning, we're going to build a school, and in every community that we build from now on, we are going to build schools, and that's like the secondary precept. The actual application of that knowledge of the good into your daily life. Now, what else does Aquinas say? He described this as having like a forward and backward looking conscience. So the forward looking conscience is almost like the conscienta. It's the fact that we're going to be making decisions, we are going to be applying our knowledge of the primary precepts. And then the backward looking conscience is the regret and the remorse and the guilt that we feel for the wrong decisions which we have made. And this is like the virtue of prudence, the idea that we can acknowledge that we've done bad things, wrong things, and we're going to actually correct them in the future. Now, the more sensitive your conscience is, the less likely you're going to enjoy a good conscience. The more sensitive, so the more backward looking your conscience is, the less likely you are to be kind of happy with yourself as an individual. And St. Paul writes, I do not understand my own actions, for I do not what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do the good I want. For I do not do the good I want. So St. Paul's suffering from a lot of guilt here. He's saying that, you know what's right and you want to do what's right, but it's so difficult to do what's right. And so incredibly religious individuals, or simply incredibly conscientious individuals, are going to feel like they're doing bad things a lot of the time, because you constantly are looking back at the regrets and the bad decisions you've made. Now, to conclude, I'll say that conscience for Aquinas is the process of making moral decisions. It's not just a faculty, and it's not just the decisions we make. It is the whole process. The process of realising the God-given reason, which is a synderesis, realising the God-given morality, which is the synderesis, using God-given reason through prudence and through the conscientia and the application of knowledge to actually follow through and make and commit to our decisions. Now, the conscience is the power of reason, ultimately, and the fact that we must use reason and intellect to try and find out the right thing to do. And the synderesis rule is to do good and to avoid evil. Aquinas described the synderesis as it is not a power but a habit. And so this is important, like the whole way through I've kind of been almost describing the synderesis as the primary precepts and this idea of an innate knowledge, and it is that to an extent, but it's the fact that if you constantly attempt to do what is good and what is right, you will develop a knowledge of the right thing. It is almost ineffable what Aquinas is trying to describe. But it's important to remember that it's God-given and it does have the supreme authority. We might get it wrong, but that's okay, because if we can stand before God and say, do you know what, I always stuck by my conscience, I did as much as I could, and I always stuck by my conscience, God cannot punish you for your invincible errors. You can only punish for your vincible ones. Is there any other thing to say about Aquinas? I don't think so. But also, invincible errors can only be committed when you have spoken to your priest, read the Bible, read the science, spoken to people of other faiths, and have really considered using reason in your moral dilemma. So this is a weakness for Aquinas, really, because actually, when do you have time, before making a moral decision, when do you have time to do all of those things before doing something? Okay, it's alright in a passive sense, like, I don't know, if I was researching animal cruelty and using like animal tested cosmetics or other things, then that's okay, I've got a lot of time. But what about when a child steps out in front of a bus? I don't have time to go and talk to my priest, go and read the Bible, because they will be dead. So that is a weakness of Aquinas' conscience, in the sense that actually we don't have a lot of time, and we also, it's very difficult to do the right thing, but in a sense that's what Aquinas is saying. So that is Aquinas. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing.